Hello students, and welcome back to Hexxit Education. And no, I don't have my back turned on you because I want to insult you or anything. I just want to show off this sword I have on the back. That's because today we are finally getting to our episode on swords. That's right. Next few episodes are going to be all about weapons, and the first one we're going to talk about is the workhorse weapon of Minecraft, the sword. And there are a ton of different swords available in Minecraft. I'm going to be focusing on covering as many as I can, while sort of emphasizing one simple truth. Vanilla swords are the least useful in Hexxit. There are much better ones, and they're relatively easy to come by. So right now I'm posting information on the lower left part of the screen, which is going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So from the bottom to the top, we have the Manulin sword and the fiery sword, living metal and biomass giant sword, meteorite and Krucknerite sword, and the quartz or iron giant swords. All of these deal what we call 8 base damage, and I believe, just for comparison, that the diamond sword does 7 damage. So all of these are relatively easy to find, well, some of them, and do more damage than a diamond sword. The next tier up, we have the diamond and ender giant sword, and that will do it. Does 9 base damage. Now, base damage refers to sword damage, but actually these damage indicators can be used as a relative guide to the damage base of any weapon. It's just that swords are easiest to sort of describe, and they're usually the highest damage dealers, but the proportion is usually similar. So if you make a scythe or an axe out of the same material, if it's craftable, then it will be approximately the same damage ratio. And the last, number 10, we have the ninja dagger, which has a base damage of 10. Now that's actually a dropped item. I think it's from Better Dungeons. It drops off of one of the walker bosses, specifically I think the pirate boss off of the ships. So when we get to our episode on ships and we get into the galleon, it's entirely possible that, if you can see that galleon on the west side of our island, that may contain a pirate boss with a ninja dagger. We'll see when the time comes. Okay, so I'm going to dive right into it. Just like with our tools, we're going to talk about as many as I can. Now, I couldn't fit all of them in one chest, believe it or not. I could have made a bigger chest, really. Well, actually, no, I couldn't, because this mod pack does not include iron chests. It just has better storage, which is just different types. So, okay, so going from left to right, we start with our biomass sword and a biomass giant sword. Now, the giant sword is a different category of sword. It requires more material, but it's actually from Asgard shields, which has several different add-ons that apply to different mods, most notably Harken Scythe. So up here I have giant, so you can see patchwork giant sword. I think I have it on recipe mode. So I think that's made from just rotten flesh, and it's actually the worst of all of them. And we also have a skull giant sword. Again, not very good quality. Here's our biomass, living metal, ender, which we'll get to very soon, nether quartz, okay, diamond, golden, iron, stone, and wood. So it's all basically the same kind of idea in terms of the crafting recipe. The main difference between a giant sword and a regular sword is that a giant sword can block for you. Now, this is different from parrying, which any sword can do. You just hold right click and it'll parry bows and some damage coming at you. What these do is actually block damage, most damage, if not all damage, coming at you from a certain source, acting in a way as a shield, which we will get to in a later episode once I figure out how exactly it works. And I'm back. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of block lag. So continuing on with the swords here. We have living metal and biomass, and moving on from there, we have the 3 swords from fallen meteors: the meteorite sword, the freezerite sword, which causes enemies to slow down, In general, it's slightly more useful than knockback, but not by much. But again, Freeze Ride has a low durability, so I wouldn't recommend it. And we have the Kreknorite Sword. Now, if you may remember, you can't actually make much else out of Kreknorite in terms of weapons other than a sword. And because it's a really good sword. This is a sword with fire aspect too. So it will set things on fire relatively, readily. I highly recommend you get this as soon as you find a Kreknorite strike. But in the meantime, as I said before, meteors are a great source of resources. They're roughly equivalent to diamond. So a meteorite sword, it takes a little more materials. It takes two meteor chips plus an iron ingot. A little more expensive than just a stick and 2 diamonds for a diamond sword. But meteors are much more plentiful. So if you can get one of these swords, I recommend you use it instead of a diamond sword. So I don't even have it on my recommended thing, which we'll get to in a few minutes. So moving on, we have these are the Natura swords, and in general, they're not great. They're roughly equivalent to diamond swords, which isn't bad per se, but they're not as good as some of the other stuff you'll get in Hexxit. They really aren't. I'm including them here because they are part of part of this mod pack, and I think it's kind of cool if you can see these 3 swords have kind of a little different graphic. There's like a little serrated edges here. It's kind of cool looking. Let me just show you what I mean. So it looks a little more jagged than a normal sword. Yeah, it's kind of cool. But in terms of general usability, I'd steer clear of them. They're here, but they're not great. Okay, moving on, we have the Ironwood Sword and the Steel Leaf Sword from Twilight Forest. And the main benefit of these is that they come with free enchanted. We have knockback 1. You know how I feel about knockback, but also looting 2. This is not bad when it comes to it. Having a looting 2 sword, you get that using on your chickens if you want to, get more feathers. Use it on wither skeletons to get maybe like wither skulls. Not too bad. We get steel leaf. I recommend making one of these in addition to making a steel leaf armor. So moving on, we have the iron big sword and the diamond. I'm sorry, bugging. Huh. Okay, it looks like there's a bit of a bug here. But no, this is an iron big sword and diamond big sword. You can see because the item numbers are changing, but not the name. So it must be a little bit of a problem with the mod. So now the big sword comes from, I believe it's Better Dungeons. Yes, these do come from Better Dungeons, and I think they are craftable. Yep, I just need to make a handle and use the sword, so they're a little bit better. Yeah, handles are just sticks and iron. I think you can also use a handle to make certain kinds of, you make the handle also make daggers in the same kind of way. And you also make spears, which we'll get to in a later episode. So they're not too bad. Oh, that looks just kind of weird. So the graphics are a little bit messed up. Looks like looks like I'm a little more endowed than I actually am. But they're not too bad. The good thing about them is that they have a secondary ability, which is an AoE charge. So I'm going to hold down right, see, moving in, boom. So it's essentially an AoE knockback, and unlike the giant swords, it doesn't use up durability in order to use it. But then again, it's not as useful as being able to right click and having it block all incoming damage. So in general, they're not too bad. But if you have the diamonds, and you probably will early in the game, I'd recommend making a giant sword. If nothing else, then the base damage of a giant sword is 1 more than a big sword. But again, not too bad. You have to find them in a chest. Check them out. They're pretty cool. Okay, next we're going to talk about just briefly the slime sword. I believe this one was added through Better Dungeons. Let me see here. Yes, because there's also the you make a lot of Tinker's Construct items too. We get that in a second. But here's the slime broadsword. But here's the slime sword. And the slime sword is made with 2 slime balls and a stick. Simple enough. But actually, it's not that bad a weapon as far as I can tell. I mean, if you happen to run across some slime, I think the damage is pretty decent as far as I can figure. Nothing else too special about it. You can parry just like regular. but it's really not that bad a sword. Again, it's not as good as some of the other stuff, but it's here and it's available. I believe that's also through Better Dungeons. Next, we're going to come up. Oh, next we have the Fiery Sword. Oh, I'm sorry, this is in the wrong place. This should be here because the Fiery Sword. This is also from Twilight Forest. They make a fiery sword using fiery blood, which drops off of the Hydra, and a blaze rod, and it's pretty good. It's fire aspect 2. I believe it has slightly lower durability than a Kreknorite sword. So even though actually Kreknorite sword has fire aspect 2, so it's actually a little bit better. So I'd recommend trying to Kreknorite over the fiery, but if you happen to find the fiery in a chest, or if you happen to have some spare fiery ingots after you've made the fireproof armor, it's not that bad. Not that bad a weapon at all. It's roughly the same as the Kreknorite sword in terms of damage. It's 8, slightly higher than Diamond. So not too bad. Okay, next we're going to talk briefly about the Tinker's Construct swords. And by swords, I'm being a little bit liberal about that, because it's not just swords. There are... Actually, let me just grab the materials in view. Okay, so first we have the broadsword. This is roughly equivalent to the regular sword in Minecraft. Relatively easy to make with a wide guard. Melee weapon, effective on webs, meaning it's similar to shears. Blocking cuts a wide variety of damage types in half. Not too bad. It's very similar to the parry, except it blocks some more damage. Again, not as good as a giant sword. Sorry about that. Okay, so next we have the long sword. The long sword is a little hard to get used to because it's right. You hold a right click, you charge up. It's basically almost like a double tapping forward and then jumping, but it's in this. So you have to go like this and then hit. The downside is that the long sword doesn't do as much damage as the broadsword does. Next we have the rapier, and the rapier is it doesn't do as much damage as the broadsword even, but again, charge boost does more damage, and knockback when sprinting ignores armor, but does less damage. So if you again, it ignores armor and blocking. So if you happen to come up against, I think they're called the Defender Walkers, which are a certain kind of mobs where they actually have shields. I think those are added through Asgard, or maybe an Asgard add-on. This is very useful for that. However, like I said, it doesn't do as much damage as a normal sword does. But one thing it does do is that if you're too close to him, you're afraid of going backwards. You can go like this. It's kind of like jumping backwards. You just right-click, jump forward, and just hold right-click to jump backwards like that. That's kind of useful, but again, doesn't do as much damage as a regular sword. So they're not the best thing in the world, but they are a little unusual. Give them a try. You might find you prefer that fighting style. Me, I'll stick with the giant sword. And so we come to sort of my recommendations in terms of what is good in the game. Now, there's debate about this. Most people say that the Diamond Giant Sword is the best sword in Hexxit, and they're pretty much right. The thing is, though, my understanding of the way that the damage mechanics works is that here's the way it goes. This is a Diamond Giant Sword. You hold right click, and it blocks 1, 2, 3, 4. It blocks a few seconds worth of full damage for a few seconds at the cost of a little bit of durability when it actually blocks. It has very high durability. You make it with a whole bunch of diamonds, and that's pretty much all it goes. Does a lot of damage. However, the Ender Giant Sword is the same kind of thing. You hold right or have it block all incoming damage for a few seconds. Does a lot of damage, but it actually does a little bit more damage. From what I understand, that the Ender Giant Sword does approximately I think they have a base damage of 9.5, as opposed to the Diamond Giant Sword, which is a base damage of 9. Slightly higher. In real life, it's not that much functionally different. The main difference is that when you first start out in Minecraft, when you first start out in Hexxit, you will more than likely be able to find find diamonds for a diamond giant sword than you will ender pearls for an ender giant sword. However, if you can, I recommend that you get the ender giant sword. And the way I put it this way: if you have, let's say you're going through Hexxit, and this has happened quite a bit, especially in several of the Let's Plays I've seen about Hexxit. You're going through Hexxit, you make a diamond giant sword, lasts you for a very long time. You repair it once or twice, but it's very, very durable, so it'll keep you in good stead for a long time. You come across an ender giant sword, and you try it off, and it's like, oh, this thing is okay, but it's not really as good as my diamond giant sword. Wrong. A fully enchanted diamond giant sword is really, really good. However, and it can compete with an unenchanted ender giant sword. But if you enchant an ender giant sword, you will notice it is... Oh, there's a meteor just struck. I'll check that in a second. Where was I? Yes, the ender giant sword. If you epic this thing out, you'll find it is vastly superior. No, sorry, I'm actually vastly superior. It is slightly superior to the diamond giant sword. So that's it, and end of lecture. In that case, so we're gonna talk about a couple other items here, and these aren't quite swords, but they are sword-like. So I'm gonna talk about them in the same category as them. First, we have a manual dagger, which is made through Tinker's Construct, just like with some of the others. I can show it to you. It actually requires less materials to make, so you may want to make it earlier. Here we go. Sorry. Dagger, just knife blade, toolbar, and crossbar. And you can actually toss it for a ranged attack. But again, it's dagger, so it really only has, you get it once, so... Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong dagger. That's the dagger from Better Dungeons that you make. This is Tinker's Construct. You can just pick it up afterward, but it does take some durability out of it. So it's kind of a single use throw. Not the worst thing in the world. The damage is, it's not as good as a regular sword, but it requires less materials. So it's up to you if you want to go the dagger route. But I believe it does actually have a little bit faster attack speed. Although, the attack speed is really dependent on how fast you can click as opposed to how fast your weapon is in general. Okay, so I'm also going to talk about some of these here, and you probably noticed these along the way. These are most of the swords that are available in Hexxit, as well as some of these other items they're not swords. So first off, over here, this is the Walker Sword. So the Walker Sword, if you shift right click, there's a little bit of damage, and actually went me through the floor, but shift right click. Okay. Okay, so recommendation, do not, facing a certain direction, it teleports you a very short distance. So if you want to cross, I think it's like I'll do it like this. Okay, so it teleported me 4 blocks away. So if you want to cross something that's 3, that's not a bad idea to use this. However, an electric staff is slightly bit better than that. You cannot craft the Walker Sword. It drops off of Walker bosses that are found in a number of dungeons. I think it also drops off the pirate boss on the galleons, but I'm not sure about that. Okay, so next on our list, and again, I just showed you with the floor. Be very careful about exactly how you use it. Oh, and one more thing. Watch this. I'm holding right, and I believe that is the defense. Oh, tapping too fast. I'll have to check and do a freeze frame and figure out what exactly it does. But anyway, that's the Walker Sword. A very nice little thing if you can get it. Next up, we have the Mon King Sword. Now this drops off of, where is it? Oh, this is one of the ones that drops off of the pirate boss. So I believe what this does is it essentially creates illusions of yourself. So let me just try it. Just attack normally. So right click. Oh, that's it. So what it's actually doing is making you temporarily invisible. I think it's about 3 seconds or so. Not very long. But just enough to, like, if you're being pursued, to avoid being seen. Useful little thing. Not to the greatest amount of damage, but not terrible either. So you get that off of one of the bosses. Okay, next we have the Trickster Dagger. Now this is a little more unusual weapon. Let me switch to Dawn actually. Okay, it's just like a regular dagger. Deals a fair amount of damage, but when you right click, you get, that's it. You right click it and you get about 3 seconds worth of invisibility, or 5 seconds worth of invisibility, at the cost of a little bit of durability. So very useful thing. You find someone, you go poof, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, stabby, 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 stabby. Useful thing. Again, this drops. I believe this drops off one of the Walker bosses. I don't think this is one of the ones off the Pirate boss, though. And that's the Trickster Dagger. Okay, next we have the Ninja Dagger, and this is considered the best weapon in the game because it does a lot of damage. A base of 10. And this I believe does drop off the Pirate boss, so this may be actually worth raiding quite a few galleons just to find this. And let me show you what it does. Gives you a few seconds of invisibility when you do that, but I believe if you shift right click, it'll also teleport you forward. So you have invisibility plus short range teleport. So if you're fighting someone, you go right click, shift right click. Okay, not down because they'll suffocate, but fighting someone, shift click a couple times there. And get around behind him and do more damage. Pretty cool, isn't it? But actually, I just remembered I forgot to show you the coolest part about the Trickster Dagger. And this is why the Trickster Dagger and the Ninja Dagger are in the same area here. Because, like I said, when you right-click on the Trickster Dagger, it gives you invisibility. But when you shift right-click with it, it does something very different. I'm going to switch to third person mode to show you what happens. That is cool, isn't it? I think it lasts for about 10 seconds. But essentially, it creates a clone of yourself that has health damage, that has a health meter. That will, I believe it will attack mobs temporarily, but it doesn't have your same skin, so it's only really useful against mobs and not really much against there you go, so about 20 seconds. Not useful against players, but against, if you're fighting someone, you go click, shift right click, and you got a back sort of a invisible helper to help you fight more with. So that's the Trickster Dagger. Very cool little dagger. Again, you can't craft it, it just drops. Okay, next. Okay, and I think that takes us to the end of our lesson on swords. And so in summation, I highly recommend, if you can, in terms of early game, get yourself a meteorite sword, because they're just as durable as diamond, and it lasts you a while. And when you kill things, it automatically uses magnetization to bring you the items. So kind of useful in that regard. Next thing, when you get a couple of diamonds, make yourself a diamond giant sword, and right-click in order to block all incoming damage temporarily at the cost of a little bit of durability. It is so worth it. Make a couple of these, unless it gets destroyed, it will last you for a long time. But if at all possible, get yourself an ender giant sword and epic it the heck out. Oh, and notice it does have a couple. It can occasionally exude particles from the ender chest, but it will not let you teleport. It's not that kind of sword. but just very useful, very durable sword. And I recommend you get it as soon as you can. So, this has been Kankadia for Hexxit Education. Class dismissed.